The sound of his footsteps still haunts me. Heavy, slow, reeking of bourbon and sweat. That night I was 16. And I knew before I even turned my head that he was walking toward Sarah's room. The air in the hallway was thick, the kind of heat that makes your skin stick to your nightgown. Outside, cicadas screamed in the dark, but inside, everything was quiet, too quiet. Even the clock on the kitchen wall had stopped ticking, like the world itself was holding its breath. "Daddy?" My voice trembled, but he didn't stop. His shadow stretched across the wall like a monster. I could see his hand on the doorknob. My baby sister was asleep inside, clutching her rag doll. 7 years old. Too small to even understand what evil was. "Daddy, please," I whispered again, but it came out more like a prayer than a protest. He froze for a second, then turned his head just enough for me to see his eyes. Those same calm, smiling eyes he wore at church on Sundays. Only now they were black with something else. "What are you doing up, girl?" His voice slurred, thick with drink. "Sarah's sleeping. She's tired." "She's fine," he said. "Go on back to bed." But I didn't move. My bare feet felt glued to the wooden floor. I don't know where the courage came from, but something inside me snapped, something that had been building for years, since I was 12 and first learned what kind of man my father really was. "Leave her alone," I said. He turned then, slowly, his whole face twisting into that awful smile I'd seen too many times. "You think you can tell me what to do, little girl?" My throat tightened. I could feel my heart banging against my ribs like a hammer. "She's just a child." "So were you," he said softly. The world went silent. Even the night outside stopped breathing. Then he took a step toward me. I stumbled backward, hitting the wall. He reached out, grabbing my arm so hard I felt his fingers sink into my skin. His breath was hot, sour with bourbon. "You tell anyone, and I'll bury you myself," he hissed. "And your mama won't even cry. You know she won't." He wasn't wrong. Mama was lost somewhere inside those pills, drifting in and out of the world like a ghost. He shoved me against the wall and walked back toward Sarah's door. And that's when something inside me, something small, tired, and terrified, turned to ice. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just went cold. If he opened that door, I knew it would all begin again. For her. For Betty. For all of us. No one was coming to save us. Not Mama. Not the church. Not the sheriff who shook Daddy's hand every Sunday. It was him or Sarah. And I wasn't going to let her live my hell. I ran to the kitchen, barefoot, my breath ragged. The old clock started ticking again, loud, frantic, mocking me. On the counter lay the big kitchen knife Mama used to cut her pies on good days. I grabbed it. My hands were shaking so bad the blade rattled against the counter. When I turned, he was standing in the doorway. "What do you think you're doing with that?" he asked, his voice half amusement, half fury. "Stay away from her," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It was low, calm, deadly. He laughed, stepping closer. "Put it down, Ellie. You don't got it in you." But he was wrong. Because that night I realized something. You don't need to be brave when you've already lost everything. He lunged. I saw the flash of his belt buckle, heard the crash of a chair falling, felt his hand on my throat. The world went red and spinning. The knife slipped from my grasp, clattered to the floor. We struggled. He was stronger, but I was faster, desperate. My fingers found the knife again, cold steel against my palm. And when he raised his hand to strike me, I didn't think. I didn't pray. I just did it. The blade went in easier than I thought it would. There was a gasp. A noise like air leaving a balloon. He staggered back, eyes wide, as if surprised I'd dared. His hand went to his stomach. Dark red spread across his white shirt. He looked at me, confusion, anger, disbelief, and then nothing. He fell. The whole world went still. I stood there, shaking, staring at what I'd done. The knife slipped from my hand and hit the floor again, quieter this time. In the silence that followed, I could hear Sarah breathing softly in the next room. Safe. Still dreaming. I dropped to my knees, tears burning down my face, but I didn't feel guilty. Not yet. Only empty. Empty and free. The next few minutes are a blur. I remember Betty screaming when she saw the blood. Mama's confused sobs, asking what happened. The neighbors rushing over when they heard the noise. The sheriff came. Mr. Walter Johnson, the respected storekeeper, was dead in his own kitchen. They said it must have been a robbery gone wrong. And I let them believe it. No one ever questioned it. Not in Millbrook. Not about a man like him. But I knew. I knew what I'd done. And for the first time in my life, I felt safe. Now, all these years later, I still see his eyes when I close mine. People say God forgives all sins, but I'm not sure he forgives this. Still, if I had to choose again, between that man's life and my sister's innocence, I'd choose the same. Every damn time. Because some monsters don't die until you make them. Blood has a smell you don't forget. It's sharp, metallic, alive. For years afterward, even the scent of raw meat would make my stomach twist. That night, it soaked into the wooden floor, crept under my fingernails, filled the tiny kitchen with a heavy silence that didn't break. Not even when the neighbors came running. They said it was an accident. A robbery gone wrong. Nobody questioned it because who would? Mr. Walter Johnson, pillar of the community, God-fearing businessman, dead in his own home. And me, a trembling 16-year-old girl, with blood drying on my hands. The sheriff stood in our kitchen that night, his hat pressed to his chest. His name was Tom Briggs. He'd known my father since boyhood. Damn shame, he said softly, looking down at the body. Millbrook won't be the same without Walter. He didn't look at me much. I guess people don't like to meet the eyes of the living when they're standing next to the dead. Mama sat at the table, her robe half open, her pills scattered on the floor. She kept whispering, oh Lord, like a broken record. Betty held Sarah in her lap, rocking her back and forth, humming a lullaby I hadn't heard since we were babies. When they took his body away, the whole house went cold. Like the walls themselves knew what had happened. No one asked me questions that night. Not one. The next morning, Pastor Henry came by to pray. The women from church brought food we couldn't eat. Everyone whispered the same words. Tragic. Unbelievable. God's will. I wanted to scream that God had nothing to do with it. But I stayed quiet. Because silence, I learned, is its own kind of armor. Days turned into weeks. The store closed for a while. Then miraculously reopened under my name. Mr. Tibbs helped me with the papers. Said my father had left everything to the family. And since Mama wasn't well enough, someone had to handle things. I was 16, but people in town nodded and said I had my daddy's sense of responsibility. If they only knew. Betty wouldn't talk for months. She'd wake up crying, calling my name in her sleep. Sarah didn't understand. She just kept asking, when's Daddy coming back? Mama. She barely left her bed. Sometimes I'd find her sitting by the window, staring out at nothing. He was a good man, she'd say in that foggy voice of hers. He didn't deserve that. I'd bite my tongue until I tasted blood, because arguing with her felt like fighting smoke. The first real trouble came 6 months later. A man named Johnny Marks walked into the store one evening, just before closing. Big man, scar down his cheek, dark suit that didn't fit quite right. I'd seen him before, whispering in the back office with Daddy. Afternoon, Miss Johnson, he said, tipping his hat. Heard about your daddy. Tragic business. I nodded, pretending to rearrange the jars of molasses. He leaned on the counter, his shadow swallowing mine. See, your pa owed me a fair bit of money. I figure you might know where he kept the real books. I froze. He smiled, but it wasn't kind. Don't worry, sweetheart. I'm not the law. I just want what's mine. My heart pounded so hard I thought he could see it through my dress. I played dumb. All I know's what's in those ledgers over there, Mr. Marks. That's all Daddy ever showed me. He studied me for a long time, eyes cold as river stones. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out a business card, and slid it across the counter. If you find anything interesting, anything that might clear up this debt, you come see me in Montgomery. I didn't touch the card. He grinned, showing gold teeth. You're a smart girl, Ellie. Don't do anything stupid. Millbrook's a small town, but accidents happen everywhere. Then he left. The little bell over the door jingled softly behind him, like it didn't understand the danger that had just stepped through. That night, I hid the real books under a loose floorboard in my bedroom, the ones with my father's handwriting and Johnny's name scribbled across the pages. I should have burned them. Lord knows I thought about it. But part of me couldn't. Maybe I wanted a piece of proof that he'd really been the monster I remembered. Maybe I wanted something that would damn him twice, once in life, once in memory. Or maybe deep down I knew this wasn't over. Mama died 2 years later. Overdose, they said. I found her one morning slumped over her Bible, the bottle of pills open beside her. I cried, but not just for her. I cried for the little girl who once believed her mother could keep her safe. We buried her next to Daddy. The preacher said they were reunited in heaven. I wanted to laugh. Or scream. Maybe both. Betty left soon after. Married a preacher's son and moved up north. She never spoke of our childhood again. Sarah stayed with me. She was 10 then, bright, curious, still innocent enough to believe the world was kind. She grew up never knowing what really happened that night. And I swore she never would. The years passed like pages in a book someone else was writing. I kept the store running, saved money, built a small life. Folks called me Miss Ellie now. Said I was strong, independent, a fine example of a Southern woman. They had no idea. But no secret stays buried forever. Because 20 years later, when I was 36, married with a baby of my own, someone knocked on my door late at night. I opened it to find a young man standing there, no more than 20. Broad shoulders. Scar on his cheek. "Evening, ma'am," he said with a smile too familiar to mistake. "Name's Karl Marx. My daddy used to do business with a man named Walter Johnson. Thought maybe you and I should have a little talk." The moment I saw that scar on his cheek, my knees nearly gave out. It was like watching a ghost walk out of the fire and call my name. Only this ghost smiled. He looked so much like his father. Same cold gray eyes, same lazy smirk that said he'd already figured out your weakness. And God help me, I saw my father in him too. That same self-assured cruelty men like them are born with. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. "What do you want?" I asked. My voice came out thinner than I liked. He tipped his hat, polite as Sunday morning. "Just a conversation, ma'am. My daddy always said you Johnson women were smart with numbers. Thought maybe you'd help me settle some unfinished business. Your daddy's dead." He smiled wider. "So's yours. But that don't mean the books are closed now, does it?" The night air was thick, full of summer and danger. I could hear cicadas screaming in the trees, like the world itself warning me to shut the door. But I didn't, because part of me, stupid, proud, tired, was done running. "Come in," I said finally. He stepped inside like he owned the place. His boots thudded against the floor, heavy, deliberate. He looked around my little house, at the photographs, the Bible on the table, the toys scattered by my son's chair, and nodded like he was measuring how much he could take from me. "Nice place," he said. "Simple. Honest." My old man liked to say honesty's just another word for hiding less money. "What do you want?" I asked again. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "I want what your daddy owed mine. Interest included." I laughed. I don't know why. Maybe it was nerves. Maybe it was rage. "You think I kept money from 40 years ago under my bed?" He smirked. "You kept something. My daddy said Walter Johnson didn't do his books alone. Said there were 2 sets, one real, one clean. Now, I ain't here to cause trouble, Miss Ellie. I just need those records. The real ones." The room went cold. I hadn't heard anyone say real ones since Johnny himself had come sniffing around all those years ago. And I had hidden them well. So well that sometimes I forgot they even existed until now. That night after he left, I sat at my kitchen table long after the lights went out, staring at my hands. They were old hands now, spotted, wrinkled, veins like blue rivers. But they still remembered how to dig, how to hide, how to protect. I went to the bedroom, knelt on the creaky floorboards, and pulled loose the one under the dresser. There they were. The ledgers. Faded, yellowed, the ink bled with time. Walter Johnson's handwriting staring up at me like an accusation. I hadn't touched them since the day I killed him. I ran my fingers over the pages, feeling the ghost of him in every number, every lie, every deal made in the dark. And in the corner of the last book, his last entry, I saw something I'd never noticed before. A note, written in a trembling hand. "If anything happens to me, Johnny will come for the girls." The words hit me like a slap. I dropped the book. My chest tightened. So he'd known. He'd known. My father wasn't just a monster at home. He was tangled in something bigger, uglier. Something that didn't die when he did. The next day I went into town. The world outside hadn't changed much. Same dusty roads, same gossiping women at the bakery, same smell of fried catfish and sweat. But I walked different now. Every step felt heavier, like the past was clawing at my heels. At the store, the one I'd rebuilt years ago, now run by a younger family, I found Carl waiting by the porch smoking a cigarette. "Morning, Miss Ellie," he said, as if we were old friends. "You think about my offer?" "I thought about something," I said. "You said your daddy wanted those books." "That's right." "Well, I ain't got 'em." He flicked his cigarette into the dirt and smiled slow. "That's a shame. You see, my daddy always said Walter Johnson's daughter was a liar. Said she had a nasty habit of hiding things. Like her temper. Like her sins." He stepped closer. "Maybe you don't remember what happens to liars in this part of the world." I stared him down. "You think I'm scared of another Mark's man?" He chuckled, the sound low and cruel. "You should be." Then he got in his truck and drove off, dust rising behind him like a storm. That night I locked every door and window. My son Michael was asleep down the hall. My husband Frank was working the late shift at the docks. I sat by the window with a shotgun across my knees waiting. Old habits die hard. I must have dozed off because the next thing I heard was the crunch of gravel outside. Headlights. I froze. My heart started that same hammering it used to when I was a girl and heard those footsteps in the hall. The car door slammed. Then another. 2 men this time. I didn't breathe. One of them walked up to the porch, boots heavy on the wood. Then came a knock, soft, polite. "Evenin', Miss Ellie," a voice said. "Karl Marx. You forgot to tell me where you hid Daddy's books." My hand tightened on the shotgun. I stood, bones aching, heart ready to burst. "Go home, boy," I said through the door. "You don't know what you're playing with." He laughed. "Lady, I think I know exactly what I'm playing with." The door creaked as he leaned against it. "You think you killed your monsters, don't you?" he whispered. "But some monsters don't die, Miss Ellie. They just change faces." My finger found the trigger. And when the glass shattered behind me, someone coming through the kitchen window, I realized he wasn't bluffing. The sound of breaking glass still echoes in my bones. It wasn't loud, it was delicate, like the world was holding its breath while evil crept inside. I didn't have time to think. Instinct took over the same way it had all those years ago. I turned toward the noise, raising the shotgun. My hands were steady now. Funny how some fears never fade, but your aim gets better. "Get out of my house," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine, it was lower, colder. Footsteps on the kitchen floor. Heavy boots crushing glass. Then a man's shadow moved across the doorway. "Put the gun down, Grandma," a voice sneered. "We just want to talk." Carl's partner. Bigger, meaner. The kind of man who'd been hired his whole life to make other people bleed. "You got 5 seconds, I said, aiming at the doorway. He laughed. "You ain't gonna shoot nobody." 5, 4, 3. I pulled the trigger. The blast knocked me back half a step. The man's body hit the floor, a dark shape collapsing into the broken glass. Silence followed, thick and stunned. Then I heard Carl's voice from the porch. "Jesus, lady. You just killed Ray." He shouldn't have come through my window. My heart was racing now, but not with fear. Something else. That old, awful fire had woken up in me again. The one I thought I buried in Millbrook all those decades ago. "Carl," I said, stepping toward the front door. "You've got one chance. Get off my porch." "Or what?" "Or I'll send you to hell to apologize to your daddy." The floor creaked under my bare feet as I moved forward. Through the screen door I could see his shadow shifting. He wasn't laughing anymore. "Listen," he said. "I ain't here for blood. I just want those damn books. That's all. You hand him over, I walk away." "And if I don't?" He sighed. "Then I take him. And whatever else I want." That did it. My hand stopped shaking. My vision sharpened. I was 16 again, standing in a kitchen with blood on my hands, hearing another man threaten what was mine. I stepped outside. The night was heavy, humid, full of crickets. Carl was standing at the bottom of the porch steps, a pistol in his hand, the moonlight glinting off its barrel. "You don't want to do this," I told him. He smirked. "Lady, I was born to do this." He raised the gun first. But he hesitated, and that was his mistake. The second shot thundered through the air, louder than God's judgment. The recoil slammed into my shoulder. The smell of gunpowder filled the night. Carl fell backward into the dirt, the pistol still clutched in his hand. For a second I thought he was dead. Then he groaned, rolling onto his side. "Damn, you're tough," he coughed. "Just like your old man." That stopped me cold. "What did you say?" He laughed, blood bubbling at his lips. "Didn't you know? Walter Johnson wasn't just in debt. He was partners with my daddy. Half the town's dirty money passed through that store. Hell, they used your name to open accounts. You were part of it even if you didn't know." I lowered the gun an inch. The words hit me like a whip. "Liar," I said. "Check your books," he rasped, smiling through the blood. "You'll see. You think you buried your monster. But you're his mirror, lady. You just wear a prettier mask." I stood there frozen. The cicadas screamed louder as if mocking me. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Then headlights swept across the yard, Frank's truck pulling in fast. "Ellie, what the hell?" He stopped when he saw the bodies, the blood, the gun in my hand. "Jesus, woman," he whispered. "I had to," I said. "They came for me. For Michael." He looked around, panicked. "We gotta call the sheriff." "No." My voice came out sharp. "No police. Ellie. Trust me, Frank. Please. Just trust me." We buried them at the edge of the property before sunrise. I wrapped their guns in rags and tossed them into the river that runs behind the house. Frank didn't ask questions after that. He just dug. And when it was over, he looked at me like he didn't recognize who I was anymore. Maybe he was right not to. That night, after he fell asleep, I went back to the ledgers. The pages crackled like bones when I opened them. There it was. A line I'd never noticed, faint under layers of numbers. Partnership with J. M. Confirmed. All debts shared. Signatures W. J/J. M. J. M. Johnny Marks. And beneath that, another set of initials. Mine. J. He'd used my name when I was just a child. Forged my signature. Made me part of his rot. Suddenly I understood why Johnny hadn't killed him back then. Why his son came now. I wasn't just the daughter of Walter Johnson. I was his last loose end. The next morning I drove into Savannah. The air was thick with rain clouds and my hands shook on the wheel. I didn't know what I was looking for, maybe a lawyer, maybe a priest. Someone who could tell me how to cleanse blood that had soaked too deep. When I pulled into the parking lot of the New Dawn Center, the building I'd founded decades earlier for girls escaping men like my father, something in me broke. Because now I knew. I hadn't built this place to save others. I'd built it to atone for myself. All those girls I took in, all those lives I tried to heal, it was never just charity. It was confession. But confession only works when you tell the whole truth. And the truth was knocking on my conscience harder than Karl Marx ever did. That night I sat on my porch, the shotgun beside me again, watching lightning flash over the horizon. I thought of Sarah gone now. Of Betty who never forgave me. Of Frank sleeping inside, not knowing the full story. And I thought of a little girl with messy braids and light blue eyes who just wanted to feel safe. Maybe it was time I finally told her story. Even if it killed me. The storm rolled in just after midnight, shaking the old house like it wanted to tear the roof off. Thunder cracked over Savannah, and rain hit the windows hard enough to sound like fists pounding for entry. Maybe it was fitting. Because that night I decided to open the door to the truth I'd buried for 67 years. I made a pot of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the steam twisting up like ghosts. Beside me were the ledgers. The same books that had survived fire, blood, and time. My hands trembled as I opened the first one. The ink was faded, but the words were carved into memory. Every line was a sin written in neat handwriting. Every number a piece of someone's pain. And there on the last page was my name again. J. The same initials on my birth certificate. The same initials my father had turned into a weapon. He hadn't just stolen my childhood. He'd stolen my name to launder his crimes. That's when I realized. He'd made sure his filth would never die. Because every dirty deal, every payment, every false entry led back to me. Even in death, he'd found a way to keep his hand wrapped around my throat. I sat there until the first light crept through the window. My heart was beating slow and heavy, like an old clock running out of time. Then I heard a soft voice behind me. Grandma! Michael! My grandson. 12 years old, the same age I'd been when it started. He rubbed his eyes, wearing those blue flannel pajamas I'd sewn for him last winter. Why are you up so late? I smiled though it hurt. Couldn't sleep, sweetheart. He came closer, curious, looking at the book spread across the table. What's all this? Just old memories, I said softly. He pointed to my name in the ledger. Why does it say MJ? Here. That's like your initials, right? I froze. His innocent voice cut deeper than any knife. Because in that moment I saw the full circle, the cycle that starts with one lie, one silence, one generation too afraid to speak. I couldn't let it happen again. Michael, I said gently, come sit with Grandma for a minute. He climbed into the chair beside me. I took his little hand, felt his pulse steady and warm. There's something I need to tell you, I whispered. About where we come from. About who I really am. I told him everything. Not all the terrible details. God knows a child shouldn't carry those. But enough for him to understand the truth. That the man everyone called a hero in our family's history books wasn't one. That his blood carried darkness, and mine carried the burden of stopping it. That sometimes doing the right thing doesn't look right to the world. He listened without interrupting, his big brown eyes full of shock and sadness. When I finished, the rain had stopped. The world outside was clean washed. Grandma, he said quietly, were you scared? I smiled through tears. Always, baby. But sometimes fear keeps you alive long enough to do what must be done. He leaned his head on my arm. I won't tell anyone if you don't want me to. I kissed his hair. No, honey. That's not how it works anymore. Secrets die when you speak them out loud. And that's when I made my final decision. I would record everything. The whole story, from Millbrook to Savannah, from the first touch to the last shot. I'd leave nothing out. Because silence protects monsters but truth buries them. The next morning I took out my old camera. Set it on the table. Pressed record. The red light blinked like a heartbeat. Hello, I began. My voice cracked. My name is Ella May Johnson. Folks around here call me Miss Ellie. And this is my confession. I talked for hours. The words poured out like floodwater breaking through a dam. I spoke about my father. About Betty. About Sarah and Mama. About the day I decided enough was enough. About the shotgun, the blood, the years of silence. And finally about the night Karl Marx came knocking and how I ended it once more with fire and gunpowder. When it was done I felt lighter. Like for the first time in my life I could breathe without guilt. I uploaded the video. Titled it The Monster in My House. A True Story. Then I closed the laptop and went out to the porch. The sun was warm, and the world looked soft again. That evening the phone rang. Miss Johnson, a man's voice said. This is Sheriff Collins. We saw your video online. My heart skipped. Yes, Sheriff. We'd like to come by and talk. Some of what you said, it matches old files. Files from Millbrook. Ones that never got closed. I smiled. I'll be here. Ma'am, are you sure? You might want a lawyer present. No need, I said. It's time the truth had witnesses. They came that night, 2 officers calm and polite. They took my statement, asked questions, recorded everything. When they left, one of them turned at the door. For what it's worth, Miss Ellie, he said. You did what a lot of folks wouldn't have had the strength to do. Strength. Funny word. It's what people call survival when they don't know the cost. Hours later I sat on the porch again. The stars were out. The air smelled of magnolia and rain. I thought about all the girls I'd helped at the New Dawn Center. Each one carrying her own secret, her own scars. Maybe that's what redemption looks like. Not wiping your past clean, but using the ashes to light someone else's way. As I rocked in my chair, I whispered a quiet prayer. For Sarah. For Betty. For Mama. And for that little girl I used to be. May she finally rest. Lightning flickered on the horizon, far away now. The storm had passed. Or so I thought. Because the next morning when I opened my front door, there was a letter waiting on the porch, no stamp, no name, just my initials written in a shaky hand. J. Inside was a single page. You think the past stays buried, Ellie? There's one more ledger. The one your father never showed you. It's in Millbrook. Waiting. The paper smelled faintly of tobacco, and I knew that handwriting. Karl Marx. I never thought I'd see Millbrook again. But life has a cruel way of circling back, dragging your ghosts by the hair. It took me 2 days to make the drive from Savannah. I didn't tell a soul where I was going, not even Michael. I just left a note on the kitchen table. I'm going home. If I don't come back, remember I love you. The road was long and empty. Pine trees blurred by in the heat, and the closer I got, the heavier the air became. Like the soil itself remembered everything I'd buried. By the time I reached the town line, the sun was setting, orange bleeding into purple. The old sign still stood crooked by the highway. Welcome to Millbrook, where neighbors are family. I almost laughed. Family. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. The general store was still there. Or rather, what was left of it. The windows were boarded, the paint peeled to gray, the sign half hanging. Nature had started reclaiming it. Vines curling up the porch, wild grass pushing through the steps. My father's empire reduced to rot and dust. I parked out front and sat for a long while listening. No birds. No crickets. Just silence, the kind that feels alive. Then I saw the light. A single flicker from inside. Lantern light, faint but real. Someone was there. I took the gun from my glove compartment. My old shotgun wouldn't fit in the car, but the pistol Frank had given me years ago would do. My hands didn't shake. They knew this weight too well. I stepped inside. The floorboards groaned under my feet, echoing through the dark. The smell hit me first, dust, mildew, and something older. The ghosts of coffee and kerosene. Hello. Called out. No answer. The lantern sat on the old counter. Its glow fell across stacks of boxes, a few papers, and a small leather book. A ledger. I approached slowly. My breath hitched as I opened it. The handwriting was unmistakable. Walter Johnson. But this one was different. The ink was darker, the pages cleaner. It had been preserved, hidden. The first few pages were the same old filth, names, numbers, deals. Then came the final entry, written in his uneven scrawl. If she's reading this, it means I'm gone. And if she's still my daughter, she'll understand why I did it. I never hurt you for pleasure, Ellie. I hurt you to prepare you. You were always meant to take my place. The room spun. I dropped the book. No, I whispered. No, you're lying, you son of a... Language, Ellie. The voice came from the shadows behind me. I turned, gun raised. Karl Marx stepped out of the dark. Blood crusted on his shirt from the wound I thought I'd left him dying with. His smile was twisted, half his face still bruised. Told you I'd see you again, he said. How the hell are you still alive? He shrugged. Luck. And hate. 2 things that don't die easy. He took a step forward. I aimed straight at his chest. Why bring me here? I demanded. Because I wanted you to know what you really are. He kicked the ledger toward me. You think you killed the monster? You are the monster. Your daddy trained you for it. Shut your mouth. He grinned. Tell me I'm wrong. You killed him. You killed me. You buried the truth, built a whole damn empire out of guilt. Tell me you don't feel the same fire he did. The words tore at me because deep down part of me feared he was right. Maybe I did, I said softly. But here's the difference, Karl. My fire burns things clean. And I pulled the trigger. The shot echoed through the store, through my bones, through 67 years of silence. Karl fell where my father once stood. His blood mixed with the dust of old sins. I don't remember walking outside. The rain had started again, steady and cold. I stood on the porch, breathing in the smell of wet earth. The sky cracked open with thunder, and for a moment I could almost see them all, Mama, Betty, Sarah, standing in the rain watching me. It's over, I whispered. I finished it. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. Some stories never really end. They just stop bleeding. I went back inside, found a can of kerosene under the counter, poured it across the floor. Over the ledgers. Over Karl. Over the ghosts. When I struck the match, the flame jumped like it had been waiting. The fire roared to life, greedy and bright. It spread fast, devouring everything that had ever belonged to Walter Johnson. I stepped outside, feeling the heat on my face, watching it all burn. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel afraid. I didn't feel guilty. I just felt free. They found me sitting on the hood of my car when the fire trucks arrived. I didn't run. I didn't hide the gun. I just waited. The sheriff recognized me. "Miss Johnson, what happened here?" I smiled. "Just cleaning house, Sheriff. Some dirt don't wash off, it's gotta burn." He stared at me a long time. Then he nodded slow. "You want me to take you in?" I shook my head. "No, son. I'm tired. I just want to go home." A week later I was back in Savannah. The New Dawn Center girls held a vigil for me. Even though I wasn't dead, they said they'd watched my video, that it gave them courage, that maybe monsters don't win forever after all. I didn't know what to say. I just cried. That night I sat on my porch again, watching the horizon fade into pink. The cicadas were singing, and Michael was chasing fireflies in the yard. He ran up to me, holding one in his hands. "Look, Grandma. It's glowing." I smiled, wiping my eyes. "Hold it gently, baby. The light's fragile." He leaned against my knee, and for a long while we just listened to the night. Then he asked, "Grandma, is the bad man gone now?" I thought about it. About Millbrook. About my father. About the part of me that would always carry his shadow. "I think so," I said. "At least for now." Before bed, I wrote one last note and sealed it in an envelope for Michael to open someday. Evil doesn't die when a man does. It dies when someone chooses to stop passing it on. You come from pain, but you don't belong to it. Be kind. Be brave. And when the fire calls, remember, it can destroy or it can purify. Choose the light. I placed the letter in my Bible and blew out the candle. The night was quiet, the house finally still. And as I drifted to sleep, I saw her, the little girl with messy braids and blue eyes. She smiled at me, standing in the doorway of that old store, sunlight behind her. Then she turned and walked away.